Commander Hyun was having a normal day at his monitoring station when everything changed. He was drinking his morning stimulant drink and checking the usual space traffic reports when his equipment started going crazy. The readings made no sense at all. Something huge was coming from the direction of Earth, and it was moving faster than anything he had ever seen before. Hyun rubbed his eyes and checked the sensors again. The numbers were impossible. This thing was bigger than the main space stations that took entire civilizations decades to build. But what really scared him was how fast it was moving. According to his instruments, it should have torn itself apart from the speed alone, but it just kept coming. He immediately called Captain Mira, who was in charge of the local defense ships. When Hyun explained what he was seeing, Mira actually started laughing. The sound echoed through the communication channel, and Hyun could hear other officers chuckling in the background. "Humans?" Mira said between laughs. "Those little creatures from that tiny blue planet. Come on, Hyun. They barely figured out how to leave their own solar system a few decades ago. Last I heard, they were still using chemical rockets and basic nuclear power. What could they possibly have that would worry us?" Mira continued laughing as she explained to her crew, "These humans are so primitive that they still fight wars with bullets and explosives. They haven't even developed proper energy shields yet. Their biggest ships are smaller than our cargo vessels. This has to be some kind of sensor malfunction." But Hyun wasn't laughing anymore. His hands were shaking as he adjusted the long-range scanners to get a better look at whatever was approaching. When the image finally came through clearly, the coffee cup slipped from his grip and shattered on the floor. The ship was enormous. It wasn't just big, it was impossibly massive. The thing looked like someone had taken an entire moon and turned it into a spacecraft. Its hull gleamed with materials that his scanners couldn't even identify. Strange energy patterns danced across its surface like living lightning. Then the energy readings started coming in, and Hyun felt his blood turn cold. The power output from this single vessel was off the charts. His instruments were telling him that this one ship was generating more energy than entire star systems. That was impossible. Nothing could produce that much power without creating a black hole. Word spread quickly through the galactic communication networks. Within hours, every major civilization knew about the approaching human vessel. The laughter stopped very quickly when other monitoring stations confirmed Hyun's readings. Military commanders who had been joking about primitive humans suddenly found themselves staring at sensor data that made no logical sense. Captain Mira stopped laughing when her own science officer confirmed the readings. Her face went pale as she realized that everything they thought they knew about humans was completely wrong. This wasn't just a ship. It was a demonstration of technology that made their most advanced vessels look like ancient relics. The galaxy held its breath as the mysterious human ship continued its steady approach toward the galactic core, leaving a trail of terrified civilizations in its wake. The moment Ambassador Kai's small shuttle appeared on their screens, General Voss knew this was his chance to show the galaxy how the hegemony dealt with upstart species. He had assembled the most impressive display of military might in recent history. Over 300 of their most advanced warships formed a perfect blockade formation, their weapons powered up and ready to fire. Voss straightened his ceremonial armor as he watched the tiny human shuttle approach. This would be easy. One human diplomat against the combined firepower of the galaxy's most feared military force. The other species would see this display and remember why the hegemony ruled over them. When Kai's shuttle docked with the command vessel, Voss made sure to have his most intimidating warriors present. Towering soldiers in battle armor lined the docking bay, their weapons gleaming under the harsh lights. The message was clear: humans were not welcome here. But something unexpected happened when Kai stepped out of his shuttle. Instead of cowering in fear like most species did when faced with hegemony power, the human looked completely relaxed. He was average height for his species, wearing simple diplomatic robes that looked almost casual compared to the military display around him. Kai walked calmly through the corridor of armed soldiers, nodding politely to each one as if he were greeting old friends. Some of the warriors actually stepped back, confused by his confident demeanor. This wasn't how primitive species were supposed to behave. General Voss waited in the main conference room, surrounded by his top commanders, and enough firepower to level a small city. When Kai entered, he showed no signs of intimidation. Instead, he bowed respectfully in what appeared to be a traditional human greeting. "I am Ambassador Kai, representing Earth and her colonies," he said in perfect galactic standard language. His pronunciation was flawless, which surprised many of the aliens present. Most primitive species struggled with the complex grammar. General Voss slammed his fist on the table, making the metal bend slightly. "I don't care who you represent, human. You will turn your pathetic ship around and crawl back to whatever rock you came from. The galaxy has no place for your primitive kind." The other commanders laughed and made threatening gestures, but Kai remained perfectly calm. "We understand your position, General. However, we would like to request safe passage. To the Galactic Core, Earth wishes to open peaceful diplomatic relations with the Governing Council." "Are you deaf, human?" Voss roared, standing to his full impressive height. "I said no. Your primitive species has nothing to offer civilized beings. Turn back now, or we will destroy your ship and everyone on it. This is your only warning." Kai listened carefully, then smiled with what seemed like genuine warmth. "We appreciate your directness, General Voss. However, we must respectfully maintain our course toward the Galactic Center. We come in peace and hope for understanding." "Then, you come to die," Voss snarled. "You have exactly 1 hour to retreat, or we will demonstrate why the hegemony rules this galaxy." Kai nodded politely and stood up from his chair. "I understand your position completely, General. Thank you for making your intentions clear." He bowed again, then turned and walked calmly back toward his shuttle. Voss watched him leave, confident that he had just delivered the final ultimatum to a doomed species. But something about the human's calm confidence bothered him. Most species begged or tried to negotiate when faced with certain death. Exactly 1 hour later, Voss gave the order to fire everything they had at the human battleship. But something impossible happened instead. Their weapons wouldn't activate. Every single ship in the fleet found their offensive systems completely offline, while the massive human vessel glided past them like they weren't even there. Fleet Admiral. Nara had never seen anything like it in her 40 years of military service. The emergency meeting had brought together leaders from civilizations that had been enemies for centuries, but now they all sat around the same table with fear in their eyes. The human ship had made them allies overnight, united by a common threat. They didn't understand. "This ends now," Nara declared, slamming her battle plans onto the holographic display. "We're not dealing with some primitive species anymore. Whatever technology they have, we'll overwhelm it with pure numbers." The hegemony contributed their entire 7th Fleet, over 4,000 of their most advanced battleships. The Crystalline Empire added 3,000 of their energy-based vessels, each one capable of destroying planets. Even the mysterious Shadow Collective emerged from their hidden sectors, bringing another 3,000 ships equipped with weapons that bent reality itself. For the first time in galactic history, over 10,000 warships from different civilizations worked together, with a single purpose. The combined fleet stretched across several light minutes of space, creating the most impressive military display ever assembled. Nara stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as the massive human vessel approached their position without any change in speed or direction. Her tactical officers were running final system checks, making sure every weapon was perfectly calibrated. They had enough firepower to crack open moons, and they were all aimed at one target. "All ships report." "Ready for battle," her communications officer announced. "Every weapon system is online and targeting the human vessel." The human ship looked even more intimidating up close. It moved through space with an eerie smoothness, as if the laws of physics didn't apply to it. Strange energy patterns flickered across its hull, creating designs that hurt to look at directly. At exactly 14:30 Galactic Standard Time, Nara gave the order that would change everything. "All ships open fire. Show these humans what happens when they threaten our galaxy." 10,000 ships unleashed their full power simultaneously. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, matter disruptors, and weapons that existed in 11 dimensions, all converged on the human battleship. The combined attack created a light show visible from neighboring star systems, but something impossible happened. The weapons never reached their target. Every single energy beam, every missile, every exotic attack simply vanished before hitting the human ship. It was as if they had fired into empty space. Then, in the span of 17 minutes, everything went wrong for the Galactic Fleet. Ship after ship found their weapon systems shutting down without explanation, not damaged or destroyed, just switched off as if someone had flipped a master power switch across the entire fleet. Nara watched in horror as her tactical display showed red warning lights spreading through her entire armada. "What's happening?" "To our weapons," she demanded. "Unknown, Admiral," her chief engineer replied, panic clear in his voice. "All offensive systems are offline, but everything else is working perfectly. Life support, communications, engines, everything except weapons." The same report came from every ship in the fleet. Over 10,000 of the galaxy's most advanced warships floated helplessly in space, completely unable to fight back. Their crews were safe, their ships were undamaged, but they were utterly defenseless. Through it all, the human battleship continued its steady course, completely untouched by the most massive military assault in galactic history. It hadn't fired a single shot in return. Then Captain Jin's voice came through every communication channel in the fleet, calm and clear. "To all galactic forces, we want you to know that we came here in peace. We have no desire to harm anyone. And we hope you'll remember that we showed restraint today when we could have done otherwise. We're continuing to the galactic core for diplomatic discussions. Thank you for your understanding." Admiral Nara collapsed into her command chair, finally understanding that her species had just encountered something far beyond their comprehension. Tivemi, detention area aboard the human ship, looked nothing like what the captured alien commanders had expected. Instead of dark prison cells with force fields and armed guards, they found themselves in comfortable rooms with soft lighting and furniture that seemed designed for their specific species. The walls displayed calming images of peaceful landscapes from various worlds. General Voss paced nervously in his quarters, still trying to understand what had happened. His mighty fleet had been neutralized without a single shot being fired. The humans hadn't even bothered to capture most of his forces. They had simply disabled their weapons and left them floating in space, free to leave whenever they wanted. When the door chimed softly, Voss expected to see guards or interrogators. Instead, a middle-aged human woman entered carrying a tray with what appeared to be food and drink. She wore simple civilian clothes and had a friendly smile that seemed completely genuine. "Good afternoon, General Voss," she said, in perfect hegemony, military dialect. "I'm Dr. Sung from Earth's Xenobiology Department. I thought you might be hungry after your long journey here." Voss stared at her in confusion. The food on the tray was traditional hegemony military rations, prepared exactly the way his species preferred them. "How do you know our language? How do you know what we eat?" Dr. Sung set the tray down and pulled up a chair, sitting across from him like they were old friends having a casual conversation. "We've been studying your people for quite some time, General. In fact, we've been observing all the major galactic civilizations for centuries." "That's impossible," Voss protested. "We would have detected your ships, your monitoring stations. Our technology is advanced enough to spot any surveillance." "Not necessarily," Dr. Sung replied calmly. "We developed different approaches to observation, quantum sensors that exist in multiple dimensions, microscopic probes that phase in and out of normal space, communication interceptors that can read your transmissions without leaving any trace. We learned to watch without being seen." She activated a small device that projected holographic displays around the room. Voss gasped as he saw detailed information about hegemony military structures, complete battle plans, and even personal files of commanders he had served with for decades. "We know about your childhood on the mining colonies, General. We know about your rise through the military ranks, your victories in the Outer Rim campaigns, even your favorite foods and the names of your family members. We've been preparing for this first contact for 847 of your standard years." Voss felt his blood turn cold. "You've been spying on us for that long? Planning some kind of invasion?" "Not invasion," Dr. Sung corrected gently. "Preparation for peaceful contact. We wanted to understand your cultures, your languages, your ways of thinking. We needed to know how to communicate with you effectively when the time came. But why wait so long? Why reveal yourselves now? Doctor, Zhang's expression became more serious. Because we finally decided that the galaxy needed some changes. We've watched civilizations rise and fall, seen strong species dominate weaker ones, observed countless wars and conflicts. We thought it was time to introduce some new ideas about cooperation and mutual respect. General Voss looked around at the comfortable room, the carefully prepared food, the detailed knowledge these humans had about his people. A terrible thought struck him. This ship, it's massive and powerful, but it's not your strongest vessel, is it? Dr. Sung shook her head slowly. Actually, General, this is our diplomatic ship. We specifically chose one of our smaller, less intimidating vessels for first contact. We felt that bringing anything larger might seem aggressive or threatening. Voss's hands began to shake as the full implications hit him. How many ships do you have? How powerful are your real warships? That's not really the right question, General, Dr. Sung replied kindly. The better question is, what kind of galaxy do we want to build together? We're hoping for partnership, not conquest. We've seen enough conflict in our observations. It's time for something better. But Voss could barely hear her words. His mind was reeling with the realization that humanity had been holding back, that this demonstration of overwhelming power was just the beginning of what they were capable of. The ancient halls of the Galactic Council had witnessed thousands of years of political debates, trade negotiations, and declarations of war. But nothing in their recorded history compared to the atmosphere of pure terror that filled the chamber. Now, the massive human battleship hung in orbit above their capital world like a dark moon, its presence visible through the great crystal dome that covered the council chambers. Council members who normally spent their time arguing about trade routes and territorial disputes now huddled together in small groups, whispering frantically about evacuation plans and emergency protocols. Some of the older representatives hadn't slept in 3 days, their eyes wide with fear as they stared up at the alien vessel through the transparent ceiling. Chancellor Roth, the ancient leader who had guided the council for over 2 centuries, found his hands shaking as he called the emergency session to order. His voice, usually strong and commanding, cracked as he spoke into the chamber's amplification system. We are gathered here to address the situation regarding the human presence in our space, he announced, though everyone could see the sweat beading on his scaled forehead, despite the cool temperature in the chamber. Admiral Tay entered the council chambers with the same calm confidence that had unnerved every alien leader she had encountered. She wore a simple Earth military uniform, dark blue with minimal decorations that looked almost plain compared to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the council members, but her mere presence seemed to fill the enormous room. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as she walked down the central aisle. Some council members actually pushed their chairs back from the central floor, as if being a few extra feet away from the human would provide some measure of safety. She took her place at the speaker's podium with graceful movements, then looked around the chamber with eyes that seemed to see everything. When she spoke, her voice carried easily through the space without any artificial amplification. Honored members, "You of the Galactic Council," she began. "I am Admiral Tay, representing Earth and all human colonies. We come before you today to request membership in this galactic community and to establish peaceful relations with all civilized species." A murmur of nervous whispers rippled through the chamber. Some council members exchanged glances, unsure whether to feel relieved or more terrified by the human's diplomatic words. Admiral Tay continued, her tone remaining perfectly calm and professional. "Earth has observed galactic civilization for many centuries. We have studied your laws, your customs, your histories. We understand how this council operates and what membership requires." Chancellor Roth leaned forward in his ornate chair, trying to project authority despite his obvious fear. "And what does your species offer in exchange for membership? What can primitives like yourselves contribute to our advanced civilization?" The question hung in the air for a moment before Admiral Tay smiled slightly. "I think recent events have demonstrated that humanity is perhaps not as primitive as you believed, Chancellor. But we're not here to threaten or intimidate anyone. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembled representatives. Many of them were barely breathing, waiting for her next words. "However," she continued, "and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. We must address something that troubles us greatly. We have observed the treatment of developing species within this galactic community. The exploitation, the forced labor, the destruction of entire civilizations deemed inconvenient by more powerful members." Several council members began shifting, uncomfortably in their seats. The hegemony representatives looked particularly nervous, knowing their history of conquering weaker species. "Earth will not accept subjugation under any circumstances," Admiral Tay stated firmly. "But more importantly, we will not stand by and watch other developing species suffer the same fate. The strong should protect the weak, not exploit them." The council chamber erupted in panicked whispers. Some representatives began frantically checking their personal communication devices, probably sending messages to their home governments about potential policy changes. Admiral Tay raised her hand slightly, and the room fell silent again. "We hope for friendship and cooperation. But make no mistake, the galaxy's treatment of innocent civilizations will change, one way or another." The presentation room aboard the human diplomatic vessel looked like something out of science fiction to the alien delegates. Professor Han stood at the center of a three-dimensional holographic display that seemed to bend reality itself. Images floated in midair with perfect clarity, showing complex scientific data that made even the most advanced alien minds struggle to keep up. Professor Han was a small, elderly human woman who looked completely ordinary compared to the towering alien dignitaries seated around her. But when she began speaking, her quiet voice commanded absolute attention from every being in the room. "Gentlemen, ladies, and honored delegates," she began, gesturing to the holographic timeline that appeared above their heads. "I think it's time we cleared up some misconceptions about human development." The timeline showed Earth's history stretching back thousands of years, but what shocked the alien observers was how it diverged from everything they thought they knew about humanity. According to their intelligence reports, humans had only recently discovered basic space travel and nuclear energy. "Your galactic monitoring stations have been watching us for approximately 400 years, Professor Han continued, manipulating the hologram to show surveillance data. "But what you've been observing was carefully designed to match your expectations of a primitive species." Ambassador Zeth of the hegemony leaned forward in his chair, his multiple eyes widening in disbelief. "Are you saying you've been deliberately hiding your true capabilities?" "Not hiding," Professor Han corrected with a gentle smile. "Preparing. You see, we discovered faster-than-light communication long before we achieved interstellar travel. We were listening to galactic broadcasts and learning about your civilizations while you assumed we were still banging rocks together." The hologram shifted to show images of early human space installations, but these weren't the crude structures that alien scouts had reported. Instead, they showed massive orbital facilities with technology that looked more advanced than anything currently used by galactic civilizations. 237 years ago, Professor Han explained, we achieved what we call dimensional phase shifting. This allows our installations to exist slightly outside normal space-time, making them invisible to conventional sensors. She gestured, and the hologram showed a comparison between what alien scouts had seen and what was actually there. Where they had detected small primitive space stations, the reality showed enormous research facilities and manufacturing centers that dwarfed anything in the galaxy. Commander Vex of the Crystal Empire stood up abruptly, his crystalline body resonating with shock. "This is impossible. Our sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy." "Your sensors are indeed impressive," Professor Han agreed politely, "but they're designed to detect technology similar to your own. We developed completely different approaches to physics and engineering." The presentation continued, showing humanity's mastery of dark matter manipulation. While galactic civilizations had only recently begun to understand dark matter's existence, humans had been using it as a power source for over a century. Quantum-level matter reconstruction became practical for us about 150 years ago, Professor Han continued, as the hologram demonstrated matter being reorganized at the atomic level. "This is how we disabled your weapons without causing any damage. We simply convinced the atoms in your firing systems to temporarily arrange themselves differently." The alien delegates sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. Every assumption they had made about human capabilities was completely wrong. "But why?" asked Chancellor Drim of the outer colonies. "Why hide all this? Why pretend to be primitive?" Professor Han's expression became more serious. "Because we needed to understand you first. We watched your treatment of species you considered inferior. We saw how you dealt with civilizations that couldn't defend themselves. We decided that, when we revealed ourselves, we needed to be strong enough to ensure fair treatment." She gestured to another hologram showing Earth's true military capabilities. The alien delegates gasped as they saw hundreds of vessels that made their most advanced battleships look like toys. Isolation wasn't primitiveness, Professor Han concluded. It was preparation time. We spent centuries getting ready for the day when we would join galactic civilization. We wanted to make sure we could do so as equals, not as subjects. The room fell completely silent as every alien delegate realized their governments had been operating under completely false assumptions. For centuries, War Chief Dex had spent his entire career crushing rebellions and conquering weaker species. His scarred face and battle-worn armor told the story of countless victories across the galaxy. When the hegemony's moderate leaders decided to negotiate with the humans, Dex and his extremist followers saw it as a sign of weakness that couldn't be tolerated. "We don't negotiate with primitives," Dex growled to his inner circle of military commanders as they gathered in his fortress on the outer rim. "These humans got lucky with one fancy ship, but their colonies will be defenseless. We'll show the galaxy what happens when inferior species try to threaten their betters." His intelligence officers had identified 3 human settlements that seemed perfect for a demonstration of hegemony power. New Eden was a farming colony with about 50,000 civilians. Harmony Station appeared to be a mining operation with basic infrastructure. Paradise Valley looked like a simple trading post where humans grew food and manufactured basic goods. "Look at these pathetic settlements," Dex said, pointing to the holographic displays showing peaceful human communities. "No military installations, no defense platforms, no weapons signatures. These humans are so confident in their diplomatic immunity that they've left their people completely undefended. The plan was simple and brutal. 3 separate attack fleets would hit all the colonies simultaneously, overwhelming any resistance before the humans could call for help. Each fleet carried enough firepower to level entire cities, and Dex expected the attacks to be over within hours. At precisely Zone 800 Galactic Standard Time, the first wave of hegemony fighters screamed down through the atmosphere of New Eden. The pilots were already celebrating their easy victory as they targeted what appeared to be defenseless farms and residential areas below. But something impossible happened when they opened fire. Their energy weapons simply stopped working the moment they entered the colony's airspace. Not just malfunctioning, completely dead, as if someone had flipped an off switch for every offensive system simultaneously. On Harmony Station, the same thing occurred. Massive hegemony battleships found their planet-cracking cannons refusing to charge up. Their missile systems locked down completely. Even their boarding pods wouldn't launch. At Paradise Valley, frustrated hegemony commanders watched their most advanced weapons become as useless as decorations the instant they tried to attack civilian targets. But the real shock came when the humans began responding to the assault. Farmer Jay, who had been tending his crops when the attack began, calmly walked to what looked like an ordinary tool shed. When he emerged, he was wearing what appeared to be simple work clothes, but the attacking pilot's instruments went crazy trying to analyze the energy field surrounding him. With casual movements, Jay raised one hand toward the sky. The hegemony fighters found themselves gently but irresistibly forced to land in his fields, their engines shut down by technology they couldn't comprehend. The pilots were unharmed but completely helpless, sitting in multi-million credit warships that had been reduced to expensive paperweights. Similar scenes played out across all 3 colonies. Human civilians, teachers, shop owners, construction workers, dealt with the massive military assault using personal equipment that made galactic military hardware look primitive. They didn't even seem particularly concerned about the attack, treating it more like an inconvenience than a life-threatening situation. Mining engineer Yun at Harmony Station disabled an entire orbital bombardment platform using a device that looked like a modified tablet computer. Shopkeeper Min at Paradise Valley neutralized a battalion of hegemony ground troops by activating what appeared to be normal street lighting that somehow created an energy field the soldiers couldn't penetrate. Within 6 hours, 3 separate hegemony fleets found themselves completely neutralized without a single human civilian being harmed. The attacking forces weren't destroyed or killed, they were simply rendered harmless and left floating in space, their weapons permanently disabled. Then Commander Ray's voice cut through every communication channel in the galaxy, calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of warning. To all galactic civilizations monitoring these events, please note that attacks against human civilian populations will not be tolerated. Our people defended themselves with restraint today, using non-lethal methods despite being attacked without provocation. However, if anyone attempts to harm our civilians again, our response will be different. The message sent shockwaves through every military command center in the galaxy, as leaders realized that humanity's most peaceful farmers were better armed than their finest soldiers. The changes across the galaxy happened faster than anyone had expected. Captain Moon stood on the observation deck of the human diplomatic station, watching as ships from dozens of different species moved freely through space lanes that had been restricted for centuries. 6 months ago, many of these civilizations had been afraid to leave their home systems without permission from their overlords. The Zelani were among the first to benefit from humanity's new protection policies. For over 300 years, they had been forced to mine rare crystals for the hegemony, working in dangerous conditions while their children went hungry. Now their ships carried those same crystals to markets across the galaxy, selling them for fair prices and using the profits to build schools and hospitals on their homeworld. Captain Moon received daily reports about similar transformations happening everywhere. The Corvini had been enslaved by the Crystal Empire for generations, forced to serve as laborers and servants. Now they were establishing their own colonies and developing their natural talents for engineering and art. "Captain, we're receiving another request for technological assistance," reported Lieutenant Cho from the communications station. "The Vorthak Republic wants to know if we can help them develop clean energy systems for their industrial cities." Moon nodded approvingly. The Vorthak had been one of the more reasonable civilizations even before humanity's arrival, but they had struggled with pollution problems that were destroying their atmosphere. Earth's fusion technology could solve their crisis within a few years. "Approve the request, but stick to our standard protocols," Moon instructed. "Give them the plans for basic fusion reactors, but not the advanced versions. They need to prove they can handle the responsibility first." This careful approach to technology sharing was humanity's way of preventing the kind of power imbalances that had caused so much suffering in the past. Earth provided enough help to solve immediate problems and level the playing field, but not so much that any species could dominate their neighbors. The most dramatic changes were happening among the former oppressor species themselves. The hegemony military, once the terror of the galaxy, now found themselves having to ask permission before entering systems they had previously controlled. Their massive fleets sat largely unused in orbital shipyards, their weapons permanently disabled by human technology that their engineers couldn't understand or reverse. General Voss, the same commander who had tried to stop humanity's first diplomatic mission, now worked as a liaison officer, helping coordinate the peaceful transition. His former arrogance had been replaced by a grudging respect for human methods. "I don't understand how you do it," he admitted to Captain Moon during one of their regular meetings. "You could have destroyed us all, taken over the entire galaxy. Instead, you're actually helping species we used to oppress become stronger than we are." Moon smiled as she looked out at the busy shipping lanes. "That's because conquest was never our goal, General. We watched your galaxy for centuries and saw what happened when the strong dominated the weak. It created nothing but cycles of revenge and suffering. The Crystal Empire was learning this lesson the hard way, Species they had enslaved for generations were now protected by human technology and growing stronger every day. Former slaves were becoming business partners, scientists, and even political leaders in the new galactic order. Emperor Krex of the Crystal Empire had sent several desperate messages to Earth, complaining that his former subjects were now refusing to provide tribute and even demanding compensation for centuries of exploitation. "The natural order has been disrupted," he protested in his latest communication. "These inferior species were meant to serve their betters. How can civilization function when servants give orders to their masters?" Captain Moon's response was simple and direct. "Civilization functions much better when everyone has a chance to contribute their talents freely. Your empire is welcome to join the new order as equals, but the days of ruling through fear and oppression are over." Some former oppressor species adapted quickly to the new reality, recognizing that cooperation was more profitable than domination. Others, like the hardcore hegemony factions, continued to plot and scheme for ways to restore their former power. But their efforts were futile. Human monitoring systems detected every conspiracy before it could develop, and the protection extended. To developing species made revenge attacks impossible. The galaxy was learning to live by new rules, whether the old powers liked it or not. 1 year after humanity's first contact with galactic civilization, Admiral Park found herself in a position she had never imagined possible. As she stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, Earth's primary diplomatic facility, she watched something that would have been impossible just months earlier. A hegemony cargo vessel was docking peacefully alongside a Zelani passenger transport. In the next berth over, former Crystal Empire slaves were unloading advanced medical equipment that would be distributed to developing colonies. Ships from dozens of species moved through the busy traffic lanes without a single weapons lock or territorial dispute. "Admiral, the morning briefing is ready," announced her aide, Commander Lee, as he approached with a tablet displaying the day's reports. Park took the device and scrolled through updates from across the galaxy. Trade agreements were being signed between species that had been enemies for centuries. Scientific research stations were being established in joint ventures that would have been unthinkable under the old system. Former slave worlds were sending their first representatives to the reformed Galactic Council. "Any major problems today?" Park asked, though she already knew the answer. The daily reports had become remarkably peaceful over the past few months. 3. Minor disputes over mining rights in the Outer Rim, but the local mediators handled them without needing our intervention, Lee replied. "Oh, and the Corvani have requested permission to establish a new colony in the Beta sector." Park nodded, approvingly. The Corvani had been quick to embrace their newfound freedom, expanding their civilization at a pace that would have alarmed the old galactic powers. But humanity had made it clear that growth and development were to be encouraged, not restricted. Behind them, the station's main status display showed something that would have terrified every alien government if they could see it. Hundreds of small dots represented Earth's true fleet, scattered throughout the galaxy, in positions that allowed them to respond to any threat within hours. Each dot represented a vessel that made the massive diplomatic ship look like a small scout craft. Earth's real warships existed primarily in dimensional phase space, invisible to all known sensors, but ready to appear instantly if needed. The galaxy's peace was maintained by the most powerful military force in known history. Yet, most citizens never saw a single human weapon. "Do you think they'll ever stop being afraid of us?" Lee asked, watching as a group of alien diplomats hurried past their window, still showing obvious nervousness around human facilities. Park smiled thoughtfully. "I hope they always maintain a healthy respect for our capabilities, but fear, that should fade as they realize we're not interested in conquest." She turned to study the tactical display more closely. Earth's Guardian fleet was positioned not to control territory, but to protect it. Human ships watched over developing colonies, monitored former oppressor species for signs of backsliding, and maintained the delicate balance that allowed the new galactic order to function. "Strength through restraint," Park murmured, repeating the phrase that had become humanity's unofficial motto throughout the galaxy. "They fear us not because of what we've done, but because of what we could do if we chose to. This was perhaps humanity's greatest achievement, creating a galaxy where peace was maintained not through constant warfare, but through the knowledge that someone was strong enough to enforce justice when necessary. The old system of endless conflicts and oppression had been replaced by something unprecedented in galactic history. Commander Lee joined her at the window as they watched a group of young aliens from various species working together on what appeared to be a joint engineering project. "My daughter is part of the new exchange program," he mentioned. "She's studying on 3 different worlds this year, learning from species that were shooting at each other when I was her age." Park felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she watched the busy scene below. In the depths of space, Earth's invisible fleet continued its patient vigil, ready to act if needed but hoping never to be called upon. The galaxy was finally learning what true strength looked like, not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to protect and nurture. The transformation was complete. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through force, but had given it something far more valuable, the chance to become something better than it had ever been before.